Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. We are welcoming you to the first phase of our engagement for the City of Brampton Forest Management Plan. And this afternoon, we have a good-sized group of representatives from different organizations and agencies, and we're hoping that you will join us for the full session, which is supposed to run until 3:30. So I just wanted to start off with some, excuse me, of course. One moment. Okay, that's better. Some logistics before we get started. Just a reminder, I can see everyone's on mute, but just please remain muted until the questions and answers session. We will have quite an extended period of time to have discussions after the presentation and when we go into breakout groups following that. Also, feel free to type your questions into the chat box at any time. There is a chat symbol at the top right hand, I believe. Screens are all over your screens for that. We will be monitoring that as well. And I also wanted to let everybody know the presentation portion of this session is being recorded so that the city is able to post portions of it onto the city's website. So that's going to be basically from now until we get to the questions and answers. Once we switch over to the questions and answers into the breakout sessions, the recording will stop. Okay, sorry, I'm just being told that my audio is not great, so I hope that everybody can hear me. I will try to turn up my volume. Is that better for people? So in terms of the acknowledgements, we wanted to start off by acknowledging that we are gathered here today on treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and before them, the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron, and the Wendat. And we would also like to acknowledge that many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and other global Indigenous peoples that now call Brampton their home, and we are honored to live, work, and enjoy this land. Thank you. So I wanted to start off just with a quick overview of the agenda. The welcome and webinar logistics I've just completed. We're going to be following that with some opening remarks from the city. We have the city's manager, acting manager, and director of Parks, Maintenance, and Forestry, Ed Fagan, and we also have two councillors with us this afternoon, Councillor Williams and Councillor Santos. We also have a roundtable of introductions, which we were initially planning to do in this portion to have everyone introduce themselves, but we have had such a tremendous response from the participants that we're actually going to defer that component to the breakout groups. And we also thought that there might be concerns with respect to privacy and people not wanting to be taped. And so what we've decided to do is we're going to restrict our initial introductions to the city team and the consulting team, and then we will be asking individuals to introduce themselves with the breakout groups. So after the introductions of the team, we will be doing a presentation by the consulting team. There will be about 10 to 15 minutes, questions and answers. We will have a quick break, 5-minute break or so after that, and then we will head into approximately an hour of discussion into breakout groups. We will be dividing everyone into one of 3 breakout groups, and when we get there, I will provide people with a bit more direction about how to get there. And then we will be all reconvening as a group so that we can report back, hear what the other groups discussed, and then wrapping up. So that's about it for today. I'm just going to pause for a second to make sure, check in with Kelly to make sure I haven't missed anything and to make sure that my audio is okay.
Everything is good. Thank you, Margot.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to pass it on to Ed Fagan now from the city, and he will give you the opening remarks. Thank you.
I'm Ed Fagan, and I'm the Acting Director of the Parks, Maintenance, and Forestry Department of the City of Brampton. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. The reason you've been invited here today is to support us through the development of Brampton's first Urban Forest Management Plan. The Urban Forest Management Plan will provide the framework and strategic direction to maximize the ecological services and benefits of the urban forest by detailing a new policy and regulatory framework, community engagement program, comprehensive management program, collaborative planting program, and a detailed monitoring program. Direction to prepare the urban forest management plan was through City Council's approval of Brampton Grow Green Environmental Master Plan. We've been working with Urban Forest Innovations in developing the urban forest management plan since the fall of 2019. A background review and analysis draft has been completed, and today we're in the next stage, which is the engagement and framework development piece. We will begin with the presenting by the consultant team, followed by smaller breakout sessions, as Margot stated. Throughout this process, it is key that we hear from you and others in the community to obtain input on key urban forest challenges and opportunities. At this time, I'd like to welcome Councillor Santos, which is our Community Services Committee Chair, and Councillor Williams, which is our Community Services Co-Chair. And I'll ask now if Councillor Santos has any opening remarks for the group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ed, and thank you everyone for joining us today. These community engagement sessions and various processes with some of the important, significant plans we have in the city of Brampton is incredibly important. And so on behalf of the mayor, my vice chair, Councillor Williams, thank you everyone for participating. I'm going to share a very quick story with you very quickly. Just a couple of weeks ago, Councillor Vicente and I had met with a local resident named Stephen Cowton. And the Cowton family have a sort of green manicured green space meadow on McLaughlin Road, just south of Williams Parkway. And we met with them, with the park staff, who are absolutely tremendous and amazing. And they discussed with us how they want to transform the green manicured little meadow park, their family namesake park, into and bringing it back to natural heritage and planting wildflowers and planting different shrubs and trees and plants to support the Fletcher's Creek forest system in the area. And that's such an important thing to hear from local residents who want to see that transformation happen. The city of Brampton passed a declaration for a climate emergency. We are committed to planting 1 million trees. And we more recently passed the Community Energy and Emissions Reduction Plan. All of the work that we are going to be doing in the next few years with respect to tree planting and forest management and green space management, and your comments are going to be incredibly important to all of those big, huge, ambitious targets and objectives. So I wanted to say thank you on behalf of this council, who really believes in making sure that we support and create more green spaces in our community. And thank you. Your feedback matters very much.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. Councillor Williams, do you have anything to add? Any opening remarks?
Yes, thank you. Such very important words, Councillor Santos and Ed. Thank you for opening this. I think it's really great. You know, the urban forest management plan is important, and it's an important step in protecting our trees and enhancing our urban forest. You know, hearing from residents to me is a key priority as we bring this plan to life, and developing best practices to maintain, grow, and protect our trees and in our environment-friendly city. I'm particularly happy to see and hear the conversations that will ensue today, because it is stakeholders and community partners who will see the value in engaging all of our residents and working on this plan to see it grow together. Our residents want to be involved. We've had tree planting events and community cleanups, and you know, these different aspects really enhance their sense of ownership and pride for their street, their neighborhood, and the whole city. So thank you all for being here, and we're on this journey together, and I'm really looking forward to the outcomes. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Santos and Councillor Williams, for the kind words, and even discussing and mentioning parks in there as well. Last, my introduction will be to the Brampton steering team, which is Brian McKelvey, Ed Hunwicks, Michael Hoy, and Zoe Milligan. So thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the session. I'll pass it back to Margot now. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks very much, Ed. And thank you to Councillors Williams and Santos. We are thrilled to have you here with us today and to have your support and your interest. So thank you for being here. Just quickly wanted to introduce, as well as the team, the city part of the team, which Ed just introduced, the consultant team. So my name is Margot Ursus. I work with Beacon Environmental. And we are working very closely with Kennedy Consulting, Amanda Kennedy, who has been advising us on the engagement pieces. And really, the lead project is Urban Forest Innovations. We have both Philip Van Lossenauer here and Alex Sattel from Urban Forest Innovations. You'll be hearing from them quite a bit over the course of the afternoon. And as a team together, we have a lot of experience developing and helping to implement urban forest management plans, with municipalities. I think I've lost count, but certainly as a group, we're up to at least 12 or 13 of them in Southern Ontario. And so we're looking forward to helping Brampton. With respect to the roundtable, as I mentioned in the introductions already, we're going to be shifting this component to the breakout sessions. So thank you for that. And I'm just going to jump right into the engagement objectives for this afternoon. So basically, we're going to provide you with some information about the project, an update of where we're at in terms of preliminary direction, and we'd like to also have you start thinking about preliminary challenges and opportunities to the urban forest from your perspective. So we're going to present some from our perspective, and then we'll be spending the remainder of the afternoon after the presentation getting your input on the vision for this project, challenges and opportunities related to the project. So thank you very much, and I'm going to pass it on to Philip Van Lossenauer, who will speak to the project overview.
Good afternoon. Just a quick check. Is my audio working, Kelly? Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I too would like to welcome you all. Philip Van Lossenauer here. Yeah, we're particularly pleased to see a really strong participation in this external stakeholder event. So I'm just going to quickly run through how the project is unfolding, a quick look at the purpose of the project, some of the planning context, and then let you know where we are in the schedule. So when we think about the purpose of the Urban Forest Management Plan, we have a few points to just discuss here. I think the first thing to remember is that an urban forest management plan is broad in scope, and the first aspect of that is that we have taken an approach to crafting these plans on a 20-year horizon, and that gives time for things to change. You know, what I like to call tree time. You know, trees take a while to get going and develop and can live for a long time, and changing our approach to working with trees can also take a longer time. So we don't try and get everything done right away. Another thing is to remember is that the urban forest doesn't really know any boundaries. So we're looking at both public and private lands when we talk about the urban forest. Of course, the municipality has direct control over the public spaces and can work there, but it's really engaging with folks like yourselves today that don't own that public land, and how the city can work with them. The plan should be, you know, a guidance for policies, improvements, looking at programs, how they can evolve, and right down to best practices when we're actually dealing with trees. And it also, you know, because it's broad, it deals with the city, but also with its partners. So some of the folks that are here today. And part of the underlying purpose of the Urban Forest Management Plan and our approach with this type of engagement is to try and build those relationships through the process of the Urban Forest Management Plan, and hopefully have those strengthened over time. And we provide in this document, when it's finished, the collaborative effort of the city, ourselves, and our external partners. We want to end up with a vision for the urban forest. We develop guiding principles that can be applied in the development of the plan, but also in its implementation. Some of the goals and objectives and targets that that give us something to work towards, and then the action items that actually speak to the details of how to implement those recommendations. And lastly, and certainly not leastly, we like to introduce this sort of monitoring approach to track progress over time. And Alex will explain a little bit more about that during his session. To just give a bit of the planning context, of course, part of our, as Ed mentioned, and we will reiterate, we're in the let's say the beginning phase of the project as consultants, and the first thing is to gather background information as much as we can and at a high level of detail, so that we as consultants can understand the sort of current state of affairs. Part of that review process is understanding the planning context. So we start actually at looking at provincial policy, working down through regional policy, down into official plan and some of these other documents that speak to or inform how the urban forest management plan might be looked at in the future. So we consider documents such as the official plan, the Brampton Grow Green Environmental Master Plan, the Natural Heritage Environmental Management Strategy, and the Brampton 2040 Vision, Living the Mosaic. These are all examples of Brampton internal documents, but there's also, we've referenced here the Peel Region Urban Forest Strategy, and we'll speak a little bit more about some of the work that the region has done. And all of these things are, as we said, being considered as to how they have already dealt with the urban forest and how they can lend support to the plan which we're developing. And just as an indication of some of the commitment that Brampton has been making, so in this Living the Mosaic 2040 vision document, one of the vision statements is here, and I will read it quickly for you. The tree canopy is lush as a refreshed urban forest. Over 1 million trees have been planted in public places, and citizens have doubled this by planting more trees on private property. Virtually all streets have street trees, sometimes a double row, grown within the latest technology of soils culture. So independent of us developing our language for the urban forest management plan, we can see that policy is already supportive of this project. And just then, I said we would look a little bit at the schedule. So Ed mentioned we started last fall. We really kicked off in a serious way at the end of last year. The team, in collaboration with the city steering committee and other staff, have been working on this background report, gathering information, understanding it, bringing it to an almost complete state. But before it can actually be completed, our process for developing an urban forest management plan includes these 2 phases of engagement. And you can see the arrow here. That's where we are today. And we as consultants like to call this the listening phase, although you're listening to us at this moment. But when we get to the questions and facilitated discussions, it's our opportunity to hear from you. And then we'll take that input, combine it with where we are with the draft, and we'll end up with a final background document, which we hope accurately portrays where we are today. And from there, we'll develop the UFMP framework and an implementation plan to go with that. And once that's ready in a draft form, we will have the second round of engagement to once again get more input from the folks in Brampton, the staff, the external stakeholders, to make sure that this is right for Brampton. And when we get it right, we hope to have the final UFMP document sometime next summer. So just a quick review. We're pretty much hoping that most of the people in the room will understand that the urban forest is really, it's all the trees across within the urban boundaries. And I think people tend to understand the urban forest as the trees that the city manages. So those are street trees, park trees, natural areas, where we say, what's the city doing for the trees? But in fact, in most communities, and Brampton's no different, that percentage of the landmass is small compared to the total. So the public and private lands are key to having, a complete and healthy urban forest. And this plan will also give guidance in that direction. And again, one of the underlying, hopefully, outcomes of an engaging process to get the UFMP is that we start to look more carefully at how the city and public and private, alliance works better. And when we think about, some details of Brampton's urban forest, we can look at some of there has been a fair amount of work at a sort of, let's say, a modern approach using GIS and some of those other methods to develop some metrics about Brampton's specific urban forest. So in the upper left-hand side, you can see this colored sort of square map, which is, a small portion of the city viewed from above and categorized into these land cover classes that you see in the center of the slide at the bottom. And the pie chart shows what proportion of the city's land is covered in each of these types of uses. And the dark green, shown with 18%, is the tree's canopy cover that's currently there. We have, from some of these studies, there's an estimation of, 3.6 million trees. We see that 18% canopy cover, or 4,900 hectares. And some of the outcomes that, some of the details that are important for us to look at in terms of management. We do know that there's a generally low species diversity. We know that there are a fair number of invasive species, and that currently there are certainly more small trees than large ones. But knowing that current status is really beneficial in having those types of metrics as we look for planning forward, as I said, over that 20-year horizon. And this slide is a little bit busy, so I don't expect you to read it all, but on the right side, we see trees can, and we see all of these services and perhaps benefits that this, what we like to phrase as the green infrastructure of the city provides. And I think historically there's been a view that trees are nice to have and they look good, and there's those types of things that we can derive from them. But increasingly we're recognizing much more, mitigating climate change, storing carbon, increasing real estate values, stormwater runoff. These are all services that this healthy and intact forest gives us, and they increase exponentially as the forest grows. And just as a final, from one of the, let's say, more meta studies of Brampton, the iTree studies, we have some estimations of not only looking at the graphic on the right side, but we can actually put some numbers to some of these things. So we see an asset value of those 3.6 million trees is estimated at almost $8 million, that it can withdraw 292 tons per year of air pollution worth $3.5 million. And more details here, I won't go through all of them, but suffice it to say that the existing canopy cover is already conferring these services and benefits, and if we can improve, it will only get better. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Alex.
So, as part of our background review for this project, we've done a very comprehensive review of the current initiatives with Peel Region and other partners. So, in Peel, there have been a number of things that have been in progress. There's the Brampton Natural Areas Inventory, which has been done in completion with partners at Credit Valley Conservation and Toronto Region Conservation Authority. There is the Urban Forest Working Group, which has been in place for, I think, close to a decade, or maybe a little bit longer now, with all the area municipalities in Peel, including the City of Brampton. There has also been an urban forest strategy done.
With the echo, unfortunately, while Alex gets sorted out.
Okay. So in terms of the, here I'm just wondering, I'm just trying to move myself so that I'm perhaps a little bit, I don't know if that helps at all. So there are also a number of initiatives within the city itself. An urban forest inventory of both the park and the street trees. Yes, there you are, Alex. All right, sorry about that, everyone. I'm going to sign off then.
Philip or Margot, can you please?
Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm just going to jump in again. We still seem to be having.
Can folks hear me? Sorry, this is Alex here.
Yes, we can, Alex. Are you going to turn on your audio then, or your camera rather?
Live? No.
Okay, hopefully we are back. I'm not getting any confirmation that I'm being heard, and I cannot hear anybody else on the other end. Not sure what's happening, but I'm being told that all is working. So I'm going to carry over, or take over. Thank you very much, Margot, for stepping in there momentarily. And I do apologize for everybody about those issues. We, despite our best efforts and dry runs, here we are. Anyhow, I'm going to just recap back to the current initiatives that we looked at as part of our background review of the current status of urban forest management in the city of Brampton. And as many of you are aware, because many of you are members of external agencies that work with the city of Brampton and partners, including the Region of Peel and others, there's a number of initiatives that the city has partnered in terms of urban forest management on with these agencies. One of the key ones is the Brampton Natural Areas Inventory. That's a partnership with the CDC and TRCA, the Credit Valley Conservation and Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. That started in 2007 and continues to this day with work most recently done, I believe, in 2019, looking at significant natural areas for management and restoration. There's, of course, also the Peel Region Urban Forest Working Group that members of Brampton's forestry staff are members of and work collaboratively with other Peel Region area municipality forestry staff on various urban forest issues, such as the urban forest strategy and urban forest studies, and continue great work to this day. There was, as Philip also mentioned, the Peel Region Urban Forest Study and Strategy that began in 2011. That was undertaken in 2011 that laid out a strategic framework for urban forest management across the region. And one of the key recommendations was the development of this urban forest management plan. Another very innovative initiative that was undertaken was the tree planting prioritization tool, which began in 2013, completed in 2014, that looked at Peel Region at various scales, down from the parcel level to ward and citywide levels, and categorized lands based on their suitability for achieving different urban forest services through planting. So you can see on the right side of your screen, this is an example of a map, for instance, of lands in Peel Region prioritized by planting in terms of which lands would be most effective at contributing to water quality management if trees were planted there. So that's just one of a number of different benefit services that can be targeted through planting through this tool. And in 2015, as Philip mentioned, there was the update of the Peel Region Canopy Cover Study, which is where the 18% canopy cover figure comes from for the city of Brampton. In terms of current initiatives undertaken by the city of Brampton itself, there's, as many of you know, there's a wide range of urban forest management initiatives being undertaken. These include, this is just a list of some of them, not all of them, not exhaustive. Currently, the city is undertaking an urban forest inventory of city-owned street and park trees, and I believe some trees in natural areas as well. That's pending completion shortly. There are, of course, street and park tree maintenance operations, tree maintenance, tree pruning, tree planting, things of that nature. There are 4 tree-related bylaws in the city of Brampton. There's the Woodlot Conservation Bylaw, Private Tree Bylaw, and Street and Park Tree Protection bylaws or protections under bylaws. There's a number of guidelines that help shape how the urban forest is actually, will be structured. There is the tableland tree compensation guidelines, which relates to how compensation is paid or allocated for trees that are being removed. There are the landscape development guidelines, which shape how streetscapes are built and how trees are planted on those streetscapes. There's the Sustainable Community Development Guidelines and the Sustainability Assessment Tool, which looks at a number of different sustainability indicators for communities, for new communities. There's a number of plans that the city has put together. Philip mentioned a few of them: the Environmental Master Plan, the Natural Heritage and Environment Management Strategy, the Eco Park Plan, and the Community Energy and Emissions Reduction Plan. We're getting into the heavy acronyms now. So, and there are several programs: the Sustainable Community Program, SNAP, which are Sustainable Neighborhood Action Plans, and the Natural Heritage Restoration Program, which looks at restoring natural areas in the city of Brampton. Another critical initiative, very important one that's recently been underway, is the 1 Million Trees program under the Brampton Vision 2040. This is a comprehensive plan to plant 1 million trees by 2040, so around 50,000 trees per year through a variety of partnerships. And then, speaking of partnerships, the city has partnered, of course, with a number of agencies and organizations, as we've talked about. And there are efforts as well to engage the community in things like tree planting on public lands. Another important part of our background review, which we've done to date, was an assessment of the performance of Brampton's urban forest management programs relative to a series of criterion indicators. This is a common approach undertaken in urban forest planning to assess a community's performance relative to about 26, 27 different criteria of urban forest management. This is based on a tool called the Vibrant Cities Lab Community Assessment and Goal Setting Tool. And based on this assessment, we found that kind of the majority of Brampton's performance ranks roughly in the fair range, with some indicators in the low range and some in the good range, none at this point in the optimal range. And one of the great benefits of this tool is it helps us identify strengths and shortcomings and identify opportunities for improvement and where efforts need to be targeted to bring the level of performance up to the good or the optimum range. Now, another key component of our background review, and something that we will be looking for your input on, is looking at urban forest challenges. We've identified 5 key challenges that I'll go through here, and I hope that we can get some discussion later in the breakout sessions about these challenges, and also some input and perhaps on some that we've not identified. One of the key challenges we've identified in Brampton's urban forest is very common to other municipalities as well: difficult growing conditions for trees in urban areas. As we all know, trees have evolved to grow in forests, not along streetscapes like what you may see here. So clearly, there's a lot of issues here. Insufficient soil volumes, high temperatures, low soil moisture, salt, etc., etc. Clearly, a very difficult and significant challenge, and one that the city will need to work to overcome as it redevelops and continues to develop. Another critical challenge, many of you are probably familiar with and aware of the effects of invasive species and pests, most notably the emerald ash borer in the city of Brampton. But as Philip alluded to, the urban forest studies undertaken to date have found that there's a large number of invasive species, such as buckthorn and things like that, growing in the natural areas. And of course, there are existing and upcoming pests and diseases that also threaten the sustainability of Brampton's urban forest. So something that the urban forest will need to craft strategies to address going forward. There's also the pressing challenge of limited community engagement and fragmented ownership of the urban forest. As Philip mentioned, much of the urban forest is on private lands, where the city has very limited authority or jurisdiction to sort of dictate how urban forest stewardship is undertaken. And so that's one half of that challenge, let's say, and then the other half is that members of the community, people are busy and maintaining or planting new trees is perhaps not top of mind for everyone. And they may not be aware of the importance and value of trees and the importance of maintaining them and stewarding them. So certainly another large challenge to be overcome. Another key challenge is Brampton's urban forest structure. Again, as Philip noted, the urban forest studies found that much of Brampton's urban forest is composed of small statured trees, young trees largely planted in many of the new communities that have been developed over the last little while in the city of Brampton. And of course, those small trees, they may be planted in these suboptimal growing conditions, so they may not ever achieve that large stature that really, to be those large trees that really provide those valuable services and benefits to the community. There's also challenges around inadequate or perhaps outdated information about Brampton's urban forest. So the data that we do have to inform management may be, in some instances, outdated. And then, of course, there is, past management practices may have not been optimal in all regards in all parts of the urban forest, and so have left kind of a legacy of perhaps undermanaged trees in some areas, such as some natural areas and things of that nature. So those will also need to be addressed through the urban forest management plan. And finally, but certainly perhaps overarching all of these challenges, is the main challenge of climate change. As we know, as climate change, as the climate continues to change, it's forecast that there will be more significant wind events, perhaps more ice storm events in the area, more drought events, longer droughts. So that will all certainly contribute to compounding these other challenges that the urban forest faces. And that's why the urban forest management plan is all about responding to these challenges. And there's sort of three key ways that we envision that the urban forest management plan will allow Brampton to respond to these and other challenges that are with us now and that will be emerging over time. So first of all, we should be clear that the urban forest management plan is not going to be all about reinventing the wheel or starting from a blank slate. As mentioned, there are a lot of really good initiatives already underway by staff at the city of Brampton. In terms of urban forest management, they're doing some really terrific work, both as a city and also in partnership with Peel Region and CBC and TRCA and other agencies and partners. And so certainly a large part of the urban forest management plan will be supporting and building on those excellent initiatives already underway. Whether they be policies, programs, maintenance practices, things like that. So the plan will identify those and support those through strategic resourcing and other means of support. Another way that the plan will help the city respond to these challenges is, where appropriate, identifying best practices, be they from other jurisdictions, either in the area or elsewhere, or the scientific and technical literature, and identifying those and crafting ways for those best practices to become adopted into practice and policy at the city of Brampton. Part of this work has been looking at what other comparable jurisdictions are doing and how much are they resourcing their urban forest management and what do their programs entail, and taking those lessons and building them into the plan for Brampton. And finally, the plan will have quantifiable, again, where appropriate, quantifiable metrics, objectives, and targets, and a robust monitoring framework so that the city can track its progress towards achieving its goals for the urban forest. So just a little bit in terms of the structure of the urban forest management plan. If you look kind of at the outside ring of this graphic, that's kind of, we can envision that as the large bucket that contains these two different documents that will sort of represent the majority of the urban forest management plan project. So there is on the left side is what we're calling the sort of comprehensive Brampton urban forest management plan, and that's a three-part technical document that includes this part one background review and analysis report. That's a very large component of the project that looks at current practices and identifies strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, opportunities for improvement, and these best practices that could be adopted from elsewhere. Part two, which Philip mentioned, will be coming a little bit later, is the UFMP framework. That is the part of the urban forest management plan that will outline the vision for the urban forest, guiding principles to be adopted, and objectives, goals, and targets to be pursued over the next 20 years for the urban forest. And then part three will be the implementation plan, which will be the detailed action items that outline specific priority-based actions to be and recommendations to be implemented, with detailed guidance such as identifying who's responsible for those action items, who the partners will be, what resources need to be dedicated, and things of that nature. So that's the three components of the broader technical urban forest management plan. And those will all be distilled in a more, let's say, public-focused, public-facing executive summary report. And that's what will be available, or probably of more interest to some of the external partners, members of the community, and things like that. In terms of the temporal structure, or how the management plan framework is shaped, as Phil mentioned, it is a 20-year planning horizon, which means that our strategies will be to be implemented over the next 20 years, not immediately all at once, because as Phil mentioned, we have to operate on tree time to some degree here. But what's very important for us, and this term does sometimes get thrown around a little bit, is that this be a living document, meaning that as things change in the urban forest, as its management expands and goes forward, the city needs to be able to continue to learn from both successes and shortcomings to its management, and adjust its management approaches based on those findings from that monitoring and tracking. So that's called adaptive management, and that will be built into this plan through these 5-year management periods. So at the end of every 5 years, it'll be important for the city to step back and say, okay, where have we come in these 5 years relative to where we wanted to be? Are the values of our stakeholders the same? Is the urban forest the same? What changes have come in, and how can we adopt those into management for the next 5 years while keeping those broader strategic elements like the vision and goals still top of mind for those 20 years. So the urban forest management plan will be structured in 5 what we call goal areas, or sometimes referred to as action areas. And these are sort of, you can think of them as 5 key topics in urban forest management. And for Brampton, as for other communities, they include the urban forest itself, which is, considers the urban forest as the biological system in terms of things like species diversity and canopy cover, things like that, and also looks at tracking the status of the urban forest and its management. So that's where that adaptive management piece comes in. The next action area is maintaining, which mostly focuses on urban forest maintenance operations, as you might have guessed. So that'll be looking at things like pruning cycles and operations-based tree planting and things like that. Then there's the growing action area or goal area, which looks at tree establishment programs and practices. So again, operations-based, but also through development and community engagement. So looking at getting trees in the ground. And you'll notice that we use the term tree establishment because it needs to be highlighted in the urban forest management plan as through operations that tree planting is, or getting trees growing is more than just putting them in the ground. There's of course all the post-planting care and maintenance that goes into it as well. So we want that to be recognized in the urban forest management plan. The next goal area is planning, which looks at planning policies and practices in relation to trees, and specifically or largely in relation to tree protection, so protecting existing trees during land use change and land development. And finally, there's the engagement and partnerships action area, which looks at how the city engages members of the community, so Brampton's residents, as well as other partners such as yourselves in stewardship of the urban forest. So now what I'd like to do is change gears just a little bit and review with you the strategic directions that we have already identified as part of our work in the background review process. And what these strategic directions are is, I need to be clear that these are not the action items for the urban forest management plan. So these are not direct recommendations for the city to carry forward. This is just looking at, it's kind of a summary of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats assessment that we've done, the best practices, identifying the challenges, and then we've sort of crafted directions where the strategic plan should go. So it's informing the development of the strategic elements, like the goals and objectives and the action items of the urban forest management plan, but these are not the action items themselves. So again, these are organized through these 5 goal areas. I'm going to look at the first 3, and Margot will look at the last 2, and then we'll wrap up this presentation. So in terms of the strategic directions for the urban forest, there are increasing diversity, so increasing things like species diversity, age class diversity, other structural, functional diversity, other metrics, and at different scales. So not just citywide, but be it at the ward level, neighborhood level, even at the parcel level. It's important because we've noted that diversity is fairly low in Brampton's urban forest, that needs to be increased. There's also, of course, establishing and pursuing targets such as urban tree canopy cover, but also other targets like perhaps enhancing those performance indicators that we talked about, So the urban forest management plan needs to establish targets for the urban forest. Excuse me. There's also monitoring the urban forest. So we'll be looking at how to benchmark and track the status of the urban forest over time, make sure that you know, the action items that are being implemented are actually making change towards achieving the objectives for the urban forest. There's integrating existing and upcoming decision support tools into urban forest operations and planning, things like the inventory that I talked about or the tree planting prioritization tool, bringing those more effectively into urban forest management. There is the tree inventory as well, so completing, maintaining, and enhancing the tree inventory, making sure that it's useful for management. And then there's adaptive management, again, so that's periodic plan review using the criteria and indicators to benchmark the status of the urban forest. So those are the 6 key strategic directions for Brampton's urban forest that we've identified, and we'll be looking for your feedback on a few of those a little bit later. In terms of strategic directions for maintaining the urban forest, there's coordination, so strengthening coordination and cooperation between different departments around urban forest maintenance. We know that different departments at the City of Brampton kind of dabble in different bits and pieces of the urban forest, and so bringing those in a more coordinated effort. Then there's supporting and enhancing existing programs and practices and policies, as we've talked about. There's formalizing levels of service for various urban forest maintenance operations. The city does a really great job at maintaining the urban forest, but sort of codifying those in a formalized manner will ensure that they're sustained and sustainably resourced over time. Developing issue-specific plans and policies where necessary, so things like pest management plans or invasive species management plans. The urban forest management plan will provide some guidance for that. And there's integrating urban forestry assets with the broader asset management framework at the city, so just applying more formalized asset management approaches, which will make service delivery more efficient and more effective. And then finally, engaging the community in tree maintenance, basic tree maintenance, both on public and private lands, may be something we look to through the urban forest management plan. So that may be as simple as encouraging residents to better water, you know, city trees out front of their homes, for instance, but there may be some other opportunities as well to enhance engagement. And wrapping it up for me, and before I transfer it over to Margot, in terms of growing the urban forest, again, 6 strategic directions. Firstly, it's improving guidance. So taking a look at existing guidelines for tree planting, of which there are many at the city, and they're kind of disparate in different places, bringing those together and ensuring that they are technically, you know, as good as they can be to ensure that the urban forest is grown in a sustainable way. Again, we've already spoken a little bit about establishing targets, but establishing and pursuing aspirational, so high level but also realistic targets for the urban forest. You know, we can't have 60% urban forest canopy cover, for instance, because that would just not be realistic, as much as we may want that. So, you know, making sure these targets are realistic and attainable. And finally, decision support, or sorry, not finally, decision support. So again, bringing in those decision support tools to guiding tree establishment, improving different processes for tree planting operations and programs. So just making sure that they work more smoothly internally. Adopting policies and practices to enhance growing sites through development and capital projects. So that's very important. We talked about difficult urban growing conditions. So making sure that trees are planted in the best environments that they can be. And finally, providing support for tree establishment on private lands through various tools. Because we know that that's a huge area of opportunity for increasing the urban forest canopy is on private lands. So I'm going to turn it over back to Margot. I will also try to fix my audio so I can hear everybody. And thank you very much. Margot, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Alex. Okay, can everyone hear me now? Hopefully we're good. And hopefully, okay, I did make an effort to try and improve my audio, so hopefully we're clear. Thanks again, everybody. And thank you, Alex. That was terrific. So as Alex mentioned, I'm going to be focusing on the planning side of things and talking a little bit about the engagement side of things as well. So with respect to planning, I need to first talk about higher level support. So in Canada, we have an interesting system whereby most of the urban forest responsibilities are downloaded to municipalities, and very little is really provided from federal government or provincial government in terms of the day-to-day management of urban forests. And so it really falls to municipalities. And so one of the first strategic directions that we've identified here is that Brampton staff continue to work and advocate for higher level support for urban forest management so that they can continue to do and build on the good work that they are already doing. From a regional planning perspective, the City of Brampton, as we've already talked about, already has a very well-established relationship with the region, and then is already doing a lot of work in collaboration with the region. And so this isn't really a new direction, but really just a recommendation to continue to build on that work that's being done and to continue it moving forward. In terms of the official plan, in terms of expanding and enhancing urban forest policies, the city's official plan will be updated soon. The current official plan gives some limited language around woodlands, well, it's fairly extensive language, I should say, around woodlands, but less so around the urban forest per se. And so that will be examined. We're also suggesting that the city look at canopy targets, but not canopy targets in terms of a citywide target necessarily, but perhaps consider looking at setting urban canopy targets for specific types of land uses. So, for example, in the town of Oakville, there is currently policy guidance and practice whereby in new industrial areas, for example, a canopy cover target of at least 20% must be met. Some of you might be familiar with this already. And so we are suggesting something comparable to be considered for the City of Brampton to facilitate it maintaining and enhancing its urban forest canopy cover going forward. With respect to tree bylaws, again, Alex has already spoken to the fact that there are a number of bylaws already in place for woodlands, for individual trees, for park trees. And so while tree bylaws can always be tweaked and improved, in general, our perspective is that the city has a very good complement of quite good bylaws in place already. But where we have identified a bit of a gap is that there could be some better enforcement and education related to the bylaws that are in place. In terms of processes, again, the city is already doing a lot and working towards improving its practices, but we have identified a few gaps with respect to processes in terms of places where opportunities, again, for tree establishment and tree protection could be looked at a little bit more closely and could be improved. Thank you, Alex. So this is the last sort of basket of strategic directions that we have. We have engagement and partnerships, and certainly it is the last one, but not the least important. Probably it could be in many respects the most important because, again, as Alex and Philip have already mentioned, most of the lands in the city where the opportunities are for tree establishment are on private properties, and that's true for most municipalities in Southern Ontario. And the city has just recently completed its 1 million trees program. There is a document that's available on the website for those who are interested and who aren't familiar. And this document already identifies very comprehensive guidance for engagement, partnerships, funding. And so really through this urban forest management plan, we are not going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to be building on those directions that are already identified. And I'll touch on some of those on a high level. So looking at things like targeting certain groups like schools, residences, and commercial and industrial landowners to look for opportunities, again, to establish trees on their properties. Building on engagement and awareness in the community through a variety of different mechanisms, through education, by potentially tracking the website, such as a tree tracking tool, engaging with the community through things like September as a tree month, and there's a whole host of other ideas that are put forward. Building on existing partnerships, so we've already mentioned the region, TRCA, CDC, there's a range of faith-based organizations, scouts and guides that the city is already working with, and so it just makes sense, again, to build on these partnerships with the school boards, organizations such as LEAF, Evergreen, EcoSource, And some of you are here today, and again, we're really hoping to hear from you in terms of your ideas about how either you would like to improve your engagement with, or you would like to establish new opportunities to engage with the city and with others related to this urban forest planning in the city. Certainly funding and resources are always a limiting factor. The city can't do it all by itself, and so it's really critical as part of and urban forest management in general that the city continue to work with its various partners in the community to try and incentivize activity and to work with them so that resources can be shared. So ideas such as having awards or tree subsidies to try and encourage greater involvement in urban forest activities, and also just working with partners who are supporting partners in their activities as well, and coordinating with groups such as the Green City Working Group and others to implement activities related to the urban forest. So I think that is almost the end of our slides. We just have a couple more, so I just wanted to highlight again, this is what we're calling phase 1 engagement, and we're hoping to hear from you basically over the next hour, hour and a half about your ideas. There will be another opportunity for you to engage with us. So once we've completed this round, we will finalize our background report and start working on the draft urban forest management plan. And then we will be coming back to this group and to others that we're engaging with and presenting our ideas in terms of how specific actions related to the urban forest management plan and how we propose to move those forward. And you will have an opportunity to provide input to those at that stage. We're anticipating sometime spring of next year. And then, as Alex mentioned, we'll be finalizing in the summer of 2021, hopefully. So I wanted to remind everyone before we wrap up the presentation that there is a survey that is on the city's website. So it's brampton.ca/trees. And we encourage everyone here to please take the time to complete that survey. We tried to make it as short as possible. It's, I think, about 16 or 17 questions, and shouldn't take too long to complete, but we would really encourage you to provide your that way, as well as through this session that's coming up, and to let others who perhaps wanted to provide input and weren't able to, point them to the survey and encourage them also, and any friends through your various organizations, please do encourage them to provide input, and that survey will be open until the end of the month, until November 30th. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we also have an art contest that the city has launched as part of the engagement for this process, and that is also, the information related to that contest is also available on the city's website on the same webpage.